Hi, third graders. Welcome back to your TV classroom. Today is Tuesday, February 23rd. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depends on when you're watching this. I hope that you had a great evening last night. Mr. Kevin, let's check in with our feelings today. How are you feeling today?
Do it. I am feeling pretty darn good. How about you?
I'm definitely in the blue zone today. My body's really tired and my brain feels a little bit foggy. So I'm just kind of in the blue zone and I've done all my strategies and I think that's just kind of where I'm gonna be today. And that's okay. I'm not sad or angry or mad or tired. I just am not feeling well today and there's not much I can do about that. And so we just move on with our day. And some days, we just don't feel as good as others. We do not have to be in the green zone in order to be productive or to do our job. Sometimes we just have to accept the zone we're in. As long as it's not the red zone, we don't ever want to stay in the red zone. Sometimes we have to accept the zone we're in and just do the best we can. And so that's what I'm gonna do today.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friends at home, what zone are you in today? Thank you for sharing. Make sure to share with someone around you and don't forget, just like Mr. Kevin and I do, we ask each other how we're feeling that day. Don't forget to ask someone around you as well. It shows that you care about them and it makes them feel interested in you as well. And that's how we create lasting relationships and that's important. Let's head on to our True or False Tuesday. Here we go. It's one of our favorite days of the week. So I'm gonna read this story problem and you have to decide, is it true or false and why? Paula wants to buy a new computer. So far, she has saved $125. How much more money does she need to save to buy the computer that costs $375? The person who answered this said, Paula needs $150 more to buy her computer. Do you think that is true or false? It's false, because 125 plus 150 is 275. So how much more money would Paula need? Yeah, $250. They missed a whole $100. That's a lot of money. Brady has $154 to buy 3 new video games. Each game costs $48. Does Brady have enough money to buy all 3 video games? They said Brady does not have enough money to buy all 3 video games. What do you think? Does Brady have enough? It's true. Here's why. 48 times 3. Well, 3 times 40 is 120, and 3 times 8 is 24, and 120 plus 24 is 144.
They had money left over.
154, sorry.
154, yeah.
Mrs. Wally, like I said, my brain is kind of in the blue zone, and my brain's feeling kind of foggy today. So, they have exactly enough money to purchase the video games. Lucky Brady. Woo! 12 times 2 equals 24. Is that true or false? True. 6 times 12 equals 78. Is that true or false? False.
Yeah.
What is 6 times 2? Well, 6 times 10 is 60, and 6 times 2 is 12. So that equals 72. Dun, da, da. False. 12 times 12 equals 144. Is that true or false? Now, you might have memorized this fact, and if you haven't, you might be going, I cannot do this, Mrs. Wally. But you can, because you know what 12 times 10 is. 12 times 10 is 120. And you know what 12 times 2 is? It's 24. So what is 120 plus 24? Why, it's 144, my friends. Which means this is true. See how when you break down one of the factors into tens and ones and do The distributive property, it makes these really hard problems not so hard. Yes, Mr. Kevin?
Now, Mrs. Wally, when Mr. Kevin was in school a long time ago, they made us memorize these things.
Right, and you can memorize them. And if you can memorize them, it's even easier for you because then you just know them and you don't even have to think about it. And that's the goal, is to get there. But sometimes they're hard to memorize. What you do is you learn these things, and you know what happens, friends? You do it over and over and over and over and over as you're doing problems, and pretty soon, guess what happens?
You
memorize it.
Yeah.
But you memorize it in a way that stays in your long-term memory, and it has some context to it, and you can explain why it's true. Where if you just memorize 12 times 12 equals 144, and someone asks you why, you go, I don't know, because 12 times 12 equals 144. Because that's just what it is.
That's why I like your method.
Because you know why, and then it sticks in your brain better. Some people call this the new math, but it's not new. It's the same math that's always been. We're just teaching you why it's that way, as well as teaching you how to memorize it. And so now you might even get to teach someone at your house why 12 times 12 is 144, if they don't know why, which is really cool. All right, today we are refining our ability to solve multiplication and division word problems. Woo, that's a big word, refining. Wonder what that means, Rafa. Well, if I'm new at something, I start learning it, right? And I'm doing it, but I'm not very good at it yet. But the more I do it, the better I get. And the better I get, the more detailed I get. And to refine means to make something as good as you can, or to make it better than it was, and to make it even more beautiful. Like if someone's making a ring, they refine the gold, and it makes the gold even better than it was to begin with. So we're refining our ability. We're making our ability to solve these problems even better today. It's going to be one of those days where I'm going to give you the problem, give you time to solve it, then we're going to show the answer. It's one of those days. So get ready, get your whiteboard out. We're going to be solving multiplication and division word problems. You get to use whatever method you'd like. Do you want to do groups and equal groups? Do you want to do arrays? What do you want to do? It doesn't matter what model, you just have to have a model. And let's get going. First problem, there are 20 desks arranged in 4 equal rows. How many desks are in each row? You need a model and an equation. You have 1 minute. Mr. Kevin, how long have we been going?
8 minutes.
Thank you.
Would you like me to show?
Nope, I'm gonna do it right here on the whiteboard. I mean, on the PowerPoint. Yep, I'm gonna use white pen on the PowerPoint for this one. I have space. All right, friends, for my model, what I would draw is this. I know that I have 4 rows, and I'm gonna put R for rows. I know that I have 20 desks total. Now look, now I have to make an equation. What do I know? Well, I know I have 4 rows of something with a total of 20 desks. And I know when I have a total and one factor, I can divide to find the other factor. So I can take 20 divided by 4 is going to equal the number of desks in each row. So, wait a minute. I know the other factor that goes with 4 that makes 20. 4 times what is 20? 4 times 5 is 20. So I know my answer is 5 desks, in each row. Or you could just write 5 desks. But it's better to say in each row because we know that it's not 5 desks in total then. We know you know that the thing you were looking for was how many desks were in each row. You could have drawn an array and done 4 rows and then shared out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and counted that you had 5 desks in each row. That would have worked as well. Here's an example problem let's take a look at and let's see if we can find a solution together. Troy had 18 homework problems to do. He has 3 days to finish the homework. Now, I know some of you would just wait to the last day and do them on the last day, but that is not always the best kind of study habit to have. So it says if he does the same number of problems each day, how many problems will he do in a day? Take a look at how you could model this. You could do circle, circle, circle. What do those circles stand for? Yeah, the days. So this is day 1, and I would label my circle so I knew what it was. Day 1, day 2, day 3. And then what did they do? They took 16, or 18, not 16. They took 18 and they shared it out into each circle. So, what is the equation we would use for this problem? Yeah, they took 18 homework problems and divided or shared it out into 3 groups. And how many are in each group? 6. Now we can check this by doing the multiplication fact and seeing if it's correct. What is 6 groups of 3? It's 18. So Troy needs to do 6 problems a day. That's awesome. Which equation makes more sense to you? 18 divided by 3 equals blank, or 6, whoops, hang on, that's wrong. Hold on, eraser. Pen, 3 groups of something equals 18. Which one would you use to solve? Great, awesome. Let's go on to the next problem. Mr. Rivera is posting 28 student papers on the bulletin board. He posts the papers in 4 rows with an equal number of papers in each row. How many papers does Mr. Rivera put in each row? Show your work. So what's happening in this problem, 3rd graders? Yeah, there's a teacher putting up work on a bulletin board, and they're in rows of equal amounts, okay? Let's read and find our question. Mr. Rivera is posting 28 student papers on the bulletin board. He posts the papers in 4 rows with an equal number of papers in each row. How many papers does Mr. Rivera put in each row? Show your work. What's our question here, friends? What are they asking us to find? Yeah, how many papers are going to be in each row? What's the information that we have to work with? Right, there's 28 papers total, and there's papers in 4 rows. So we know the number of rows, and we know the total number of papers. And we're trying to figure out how many papers in each row. It's very similar to the problem we did at the beginning. Go ahead, write a model, an equation, and an answer. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Go. Okay, friends, I'm curious. Mr. Kevin, did you hear the problem that I read?
I did.
I'm curious, how would you solve this problem? What do you think you would do?
Well, to me, it looks like a division problem.
Right.
So I know the whole 28 papers.
So I'm going to draw as Mr. Kevin talks. So he knows the whole is 28 papers.
Mm-hmm. And I know that the papers are in 4 rows. So there's 4 rows. And now we need to find how many papers in each row. So it's a division of 28 divided by 4 equals
Something.
Yeah.
Friends, do you know the multiplication equation you could use for this? Yeah, 4 groups of something equals 28.
Yeah.
What was your solution? Four times 7 equals 28. Awesome. So how many papers are in each row? 7 papers in each row. Now you could have solved that by sharing out the papers and counting them up. You could have solved it by saying, well, 4 times something is 28. I know that 4 groups of 7 is 28. You could have solved it by skip counting 7, 14, and skip counting all the way to 28 and counting how many groups of 7. It was 4, right? Or you skip count by 4 and figure out how many 4s there were to get to 28. There's lots of ways you could have solved this. Excellent job. Let's look at our next problem. There are 54 players at a baseball clinic. The coach puts them into teams of 9 players. How many teams are there? Show your work. This is going to look different. Go ahead, let's read and be thinking about how you might model this problem. We're going to go step by step with the information we know as we go, and we're going to model it. Okay, there are 54 players at a baseball clinic. The coach puts them into teams of 9 players. How many teams are there? What's happening? Yeah, there's a baseball clinic, there's players, and there's teams. What question are we trying to answer? We're trying to figure out how many teams there are. We're not trying to figure out how many in each team. We're trying to figure out how many teams there are. Let's read and find the information we know. There are 54 players at a baseball clinic. The coach puts them into teams of 9 players. What do we know? There's 54 players. Each team has 9. So what kind of model can we put? I don't think an array, really, because we're not into like rows and that kind of thing. We could, but what model do you think would match this best? Okay, so I hear Rafa saying, well, write a 9 down, Mrs. Wally, and circle it. That's 1 team. Okay, but that doesn't get to 54 players. So then what am I gonna do? Well, do another one, okay? 9. 2 teams. Actually, that's still 1. That counts as 1 team. So I'm actually going to just write team. I'm going to say team. If it will stay put. Team. I'm at 18. Let's see. Team. What am I at? 27. Wait a minute, 27 plus 27 is 54. So I can do 3 more 9s, and that's going to get me to 54. Team, team, team. Now, trying to think about what I did mathematically. I took 54, and I skip counted by groups of 9. And that got me what? 6. I didn't know the answer, but I took 54 and I divided it into groups of 9, and then I counted how many groups that made. So how many teams are there? 6 teams. Awesome. Friends, we're going to skip this last one. Here is your assignment today. You're going to finish refining your ability to solve a multiplication and division story problems. You're going to do page 383 and 384.
Unless you just want to repeat
Problem
383.
solved. And complete those and make sure to check in with your teacher. If we're doing this work and you're sitting at home right now going, don't get it, that's okay. What I want you to do is 2 things. I want you to re-watch it and just watch and not do the math with me. I want you to try to understand and watch what I'm doing. Then I want you to contact your teacher and say, I'm not understanding this, I need your help. Okay, so that's your job. If this is not making sense to you, no need to panic. Watch my video again. Make sure you're not doing it with me and you're just watching what I'm doing and understanding, and contact your teacher. Both things are important, okay? Awesome. Today, we refined our ability to solve multiplication and division word problems. We created models, we wrote equations, we chose the best strategy for ourselves, and we found solutions. Mr. Kevin, if they wanted to contact us here at the TV Classroom, let's remind them how to do that.
You bet. Mrs. Wally would love to hear from you. You can email us at tvclassroom@tacoma.k12.wa.us, or you can send something in the mail, and we will respond. TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kevin. Now, friends, it's time for your break. And then, Miss Oslin. For Miss Oslin, you need to make sure you have your ELA packet, your learning notebook, your learning buddy, and a pencil. Please take care of your needs during your break. Get a drink of water, get wiggles, grab a snack, and then be ready to learn when she comes back. Thank you, 3rd graders, for learning with me today. I hope you have an awesome day, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Hello, my name is Denise, and I'm a violinist with the Northwest Sinfonietta. I'm here for us to share a moment of breathing and listening to music together today. Let's start by getting centered by taking a few breaths together. We're going to inhale to a count of 4, and then we're going to hold our breath for 4 counts, and then we'll exhale to a count of 4. Get comfortable, relax your shoulders, maybe roll your head side to side once or twice, and let's inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that one more time. This time I won't count aloud. We can all count in our heads, and if you like, go ahead and close your eyes. Ready? Inhale. Hold your breath, and exhale. Well done. I'm going to play a piece called Fairy Tales for you by the composer Ignatius Sancho. He lived from 1729 to 1780. If you think of fairy tales, what comes to your mind? Maybe magical creatures or talking animals or kids off having adventures. What feelings get stirred up in you by those stories? And how would you express those feelings in music? Do you think the music would be slow and quiet with long singing tones? Or maybe it would be light and fast, like sounds of laughter and dancing? Listen to this piece and notice what kind of feeling Ignatius Sancho expresses with his music. What do you think of that music? It sounds pretty light and happy. You might think that Mr. Sancho really liked fairy tales, and that maybe he also had a good sense of humor and was a happy person to be able to write a piece like that. It's amazing to me to know that Mr. Sancho was born in 1729 on a slave ship off the coast of Africa. He faced the world alone because he lost his parents when he was young. Despite being enslaved, he taught himself to read and write and to play music. He spoke out against the slave trade and wrote essays, plays, poetry, and music. Here's another beautiful piece by Ignatius Sancho. It's called Minuet number 15. Ignatius Sancho was eventually freed from enslavement and went on to start a business, a successful grocery store, and to become the first Black person of African origin to vote in England. He was also the first Black composer to have his music published. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Ignatius Sancho's music with me and to taking a few breaths together.
Hi, third graders. Welcome back from your break. Boy, we are having a day here at TV Classroom. Mrs. Wally's body wasn't feeling well. Mr. Kevin's computer equipment isn't feeling well. Let's all just take a collective and just remind ourselves. Mrs. Wally's really good about reminding us that we can do things and we're all just gonna do the best that we can, and that's okay. The best we can do today might not be as good as it was yesterday or as good as it will be tomorrow, but that's okay. We can do things.
It's okay.
It's okay. We can do things. So third graders, I see that you can do things as well. You grabbed your ELA packet and your pencil, your learning buddy, and your reading notebook. Excellent job doing things. Go ahead and take those materials and put them off to the side. You can hold on to your learning buddy if they are going to help you focus. Now let's remind ourselves of our 3 personal standards. These are the behaviors that we agree to when we come together so that everyone feels safe thinking and speaking and sharing. Say these out loud with me. Show respect.
Show respect.
Make good decisions.
Make good decisions.
Solve problems.
Solve problems.
And I can tell you, Mr. Kevin and I have worked really hard on solving some problems the last couple minutes. Now, we were also very respectful while we did that, because sometimes when there's problems, it can make you frustrated or flustered, and it can be hard to be respectful, but we were still very respectful. Yes, Mr. Kevin?
Yeah, it's okay to acknowledge that you're having an issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna kiss my brain for not getting frustrated. Or I was frustrated, but I was still respectful to the computer equipment. So here we go. We have been working on reading different types of fiction stories. You'll remember fiction is a type of literature that comes from our author's imagination. It's made up, it's not real. And specifically, we've been doing a lot of work around folk tales. And you'll remember folk tales are stories passed down from generation to generation, usually told orally, which means by mouth. And folk tales are specific to a certain culture. And you'll remember our culture is the people that we share common habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. We read Anansi the Spider, which is a tale from the Ashanti people of Ghana in West Africa. And we talked about how folktales have language, two different types of language. They have literary language, which talks about like once upon a time, or gives you ideas about when time is passing, or what else is happening in the story. But there's also cultural language that are specific to folktales. And the cultural language usually gives us a clue or gives us some background information about that culture that helps us better understand and remember what we're reading. Today we're learning to recognize why folktales have been told from generation to generation and how they reflect the values or beliefs of a culture. And we're going to do that with Anansi the Impossible. It's another story of Anansi. I'm really excited to read this. But before we do, I want to discuss some other elements of folktales. And in your ELA packet, you have this Elements of Folktales documents. It's page 11. I do want you to go ahead and take a moment and open up your packet to page 11 and read these with me. Okay, I see most of you have the page 11 in front of you. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, 15 seconds to read through these bullet points and think about what elements of folktales have we already seen in the stories that we've read or the stories that we've been listening to from some of our special guests. Think back to Quabi from the Peace Bus. He told us a folktale. Think back to Melanie Denise Cunningham, our Peace Queen. She told us a folktale. Think back to Anthony Bluehorse. He also told us a folktale. Think about what elements of folktales have we heard or read. Go ahead. Okay, now turn and tell your learning buddy which elements of folktales we've heard from our special guests or we've read in the stories that we've read. Rafa, there's definitely been literary language to explain historical nature. There's definitely been cultural language using people's names or specific examples. Characters use trickery to complete a quest. Remember the raven from Anthony Bluehorse, who told us that story? Characters are often animals with human qualities. Definitely. Now I'm thinking about Anansi the spider and how Anansi was kind of mischievous, like to find trouble. They've been passed down over many years and many generations, reflect the beliefs or values of the community. They show how people act or give moral guidance, definitely, are often accompanied by traditional artwork. Anansi the spider definitely has traditional artwork. And explain how the world works or the wonders of the world from different perspectives that may be new for readers. I don't know that we've encountered that one yet. And to entertain and amuse, definitely. Now, as we read our new story today, we're going to think about these elements of folktales. And I want to point out that there is a glossary in our story. And our glossary does a couple different things. Number one, it helps me as the reader pronounce the cultural language correctly. It's really important that we respect the Ashanti people and pronounce their words correctly. So this helps me as a reader do that. So you're going to see as I get to words in this book, I'm going to go back to the glossary and make sure that I'm saying them correctly. It also helps me have a definition of what the words mean so that I, as a reader, can better understand and remember what this folktale is about. Are we ready to read Anansi and the Impossible? And I'm really excited that today I have the PowerPoint for you to see, but I have the actual book in my hands. So I get to turn the pages and look at the illustrations along with you, so I can see it a little bit better than what you can see, than what I could see on the PowerPoint. So here we go. Anansi does the impossible, an Ashanti tale. This is retold by Verna Ardima, and you'll remember that folk tales are told over and over and over. And we had an example of that when Melanie Denise Cunningham, our Peace Queen, said, well, this is the version that I've heard, which means that there's different versions of the same story. And this is illustrated by Lisa Desamini. Long, long ago, when the earth was set down and the sky was lifted up, all folk tales were owned by the sky god. Now, right there, the very first 3 words are literary language. Long, long ago. It's setting us up as readers to know that this is a folk tale that has been passed down because it's from long, long ago. And also I'm noticing that the next line, or the line continues, when the earth was set down and the sky was lifted up, all folk tales were owned by the sky god. That term is in the glossary. It says, when the earth was set down and the sky was lifted up. And that means this reflects an ancient belief that the sky was once close to the earth. However, when people began to break off pieces of it and eat them, the creator, Enyeme, lifted it high above their reach. Now that is some cultural language that's included in the story. And I was able to go back and reread the glossary to keep track of that cultural language to help me understand the story. One day, Anansi the spider said to his wife, okay, it's A-S-O. I want to make sure I pronounce that name correctly. So I'm going to go back to the glossary. And it said, oh, I pronounce it Aso. Aso is Anansi's wife. Okay. One day, Anansi the spider said to his wife, Aso, it is wrong that the tales our storytellers have told for generations belong to the sky god. I'm going to buy them for our earth people. Aso said, do you really think you can bargain with anyone so powerful? Anansi, I fear you are taking a morsel too big to fit in your mouth. Well, we shall see, said Anansi, and the very next day he went to the sky god. Now, I'm noticing some elements of folktales here. We have our animals, our characters are animals, but they have human qualities, and they're talking. There's a lot of cultural language here. Aso's name is some cultural language. There's trickery. Pay attention to that. And then this story is accompanied by some artwork. Pay really close attention to Anansi and Aso's clothing. It's beautiful works of art. Let's keep reading. Puffing out his chest, he said, Your Excellency, I have come to buy your stories. The sky god beat his thunder. Tun, tun, tun. Okay, that word is K-W-O. I'm going to go back to my glossary. Quo. That's an idiophone expressing disgust. That means it's like we would say, ugh, or ew. This cultural language is, pronounce it again, quo, quo. He bellowed, that means disgust. Quo, he bellowed. What makes you think you can buy them? Kings have tried and failed, and you are not even a man. What would you want in exchange for them? Asked Anansi. The sky god rubbed his great chin. At last he said, The price is 3 impossible tasks. Bring me a live python, a real fairy, and 47 stinging hornets. I can manage that, said Anansi. Then he hurried straight home to Aso. Anansi told her, I have to pay a live python, a real fairy, and 47 stinging hornets for the stories. However can I manage that? Aso thought and thought. Finally, she said, I know how to begin. and she whispered, "Pesa, pesa, pesa," in Anansi's ear. Anansi chuckled, "Gug, gug, gug." At once, he ran with Aso to a nearby river. There, they sat on a log and waited. Presently, a python came slithering. Wassa, woosa, wassa, woosa, down to the water to drink. Anansi said in a loud voice, "It is longer than he is." "Not longer," shouted Aso. "Maybe just as long, but not longer." The big snake raised his head. "What are you two arguing about?" he asked. "I say the log we're sitting on is longer than you are," Anansi answered, "but my wife says it is not." "Sss," hissed the python. "This small thing, I know I am longer. I feel longer." "Well," said Anansi, "you look shorter to me." "I'll show you," said the python. He lay down on the log, putting his nose even with one end of it. "Your tail is too short," said Anansi, and he gave the tail a pull. "Now my nose is too short," cried the python, and he wriggled back to the end of the log. "I know what to do," said Aso. "Tie his tail to the other end, then he can make himself longer." Anansi took a long bush rope and began winding it around the snake's tail and the log. Kapong, kapong, kapong. The python tried to make himself longer. He stretched and stretched, grunting, Meanwhile, Anansi kept winding until he'd wound the rope all the way up to the python's head. What do you think Anansi is doing here? Take some think time. Turn and tell your learning buddy what you're thinking. Rafa, I know that trickery is an element of folk tales, so I think Anansi and Aso are tricking the python. When he had the snake tied tight, he cried, "You foolish python! You let me catch you. Now I'm going to take you to the sky god." And off he went, dragging the python behind him. When Anansi gave the huge snake to the sky god, his scowl darkened the sun. He said, "It is true, you have brought the python, but you have yet to bring a real fairy and 47 stinging hornets." I wonder if there's meaning behind the specific number 47. I don't know. Anansi went home to Aso and asked, "How are we going to catch a fairy?" Aso thought and thought. Finally, she said, "I know." And she whispered, "Pesa, pesa, pesa," to Anansi. Anansi laughed. Tway is how that's pronounced. Tway, tway, tway. As Aso had suggested, he carved a wooden fairy and covered it with sticky gum from a mimosa tree. Aso put a tiny dish of banana fufu in its hand. When the moon was bright, Anansi took the make-believe fairy to the odum tree where the fairies liked to play. He tied a long string to the wooden fairy's back and another to its head. Then, clutching the ends of the strings, he hid behind some bushes. There's more trickery. Presently, there's some literary language for us. Presently, some fairies came tripping to the odum tree. They danced around it, lip, 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 and one of them cried in a tinkling voice, "Look, here is a stranger. She has a dish of fufu." The fairy's sister smacked her small lips. "Puh, puh, puh. Ask her to give us some," she said. So the first fairy asked, "Kind stranger, may I please have a taste of your fufu?" Anansi pulled one string and the doll nodded its head. The fairy took a tiny taste. "Ooh," she said, "your fufu is delicious. Thank you." The wooden fairy said nothing. "Look," said the first fairy, "I told her thank you, yet she didn't answer me." "Slap her spanking place," said the sister. The first fairy hit hard. Pah! Her hand stuck. Let me go, she cried. The sister said, hit her again. That will teach her to let you go. The first fairy struck the doll with her other hand. Pah! And that stuck too. Quickly, Anansi pulled the strings. Now the doll with the fairy attached came bumping over to him. I'm looking at Kapari, Kapari, Kapari. The little fairy screamed, ee! In her eerie little voice as she was being dragged away, and her sister shrieked, ee! 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 As they ran after her. Anansi soon outran those other fairies. Then he said to the one he had caught, little fairy, I'm going to take you to the sky god. And he did. When the sky god saw Anansi coming with the fairy, he roared, how can a measly creature like you perform these impossible tasks? But then he added, I admit that the python and the fairy are here. Still, you have not brought me the 47 hornets. Anansi ran home to Aso and asked, how are we going to catch 47 hornets? Aso thought and thought. Finally, she said, I know how. And she whispered, Pesa, 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 to Anansi. Anansi laughed. Gay, gay, gay. And as Aso had suggested, he plucked a bottle-shaped gourd. A gourd is like a pumpkin or like a butternut squash. He plucked a bottle-shaped gourd from a calabash tree, whittled a wooden cork for it, and filled it with water from the river. Next, he found a hornet's nest in a bush. Climbing high up a nearby tree, he tipped the bottle and let the water gurgle. Goler, 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 down upon the hornets. My brothers, called Anansi, do you want a better shelter? See, in this calabash you will be safe and dry. He held out the empty gourd. More trickery. The hornets buzzed around it. One flew in, then another and another. When Anansi had counted 47 of them, he popped the stopper in. Cop! Little hornets, he said, I'm going to take you to the sky god. And off he went. The sky god saw Anansi coming. At once, he flashed his lightning, wee, 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 and beat his thunder, tun, tun, tun. Holding out the buzzing gourd, Anansi said, in here are 47 stinging hornets. Do you want to count them? No, cried the sky god. He threw up his hands in resignation and said, Anansi, you have paid the price. The live python, the real fairy, and the 47 stinging hornets are mine. From now on, the stories belong to you. Anansi thanked the sky god, then hurried home. That night, the people of the village gathered inside a circle of fires for storytelling, and Anansi told how he and Aso had managed to buy the sky god's stories. The people rejoiced, shouting, honor to Anansi, honor to Aso, honor to Anansi and Aso. And from that day to this, the folk stories of West Africa have been called Anansi tales. Now we can understand exactly why our author said that the Anansi, our author Gerald McDermott, who wrote Anansi and the Spider, said that the Anansi is a folk hero to the Ashanti people. And now we know why, because he saved their stories from the sky god. Now, let's think about what is the purpose, because that was part of our learning intention. What is the reason for this folk tale? You have a page 10 in your ELA packet. And don't worry about getting that out right now, because I'm going to show you how I can think about Anansi does the impossible to figure out what the reason is. Now, Mr. Kevin, can you show them my paper here on the table that I have, where I've modeled writing the title of the folktale, which is Anansi Does the Impossible. It's retold by Verna Ardima, and it's originally from the Ashanti people of Africa, or of Ghana in Africa, but we want to be specific when we talk about people, because Africa is a very large continent. Now, it says, I think this folktale was told in order to reflect beliefs or values, teach how to behave or act, examine the wonders of the world, or entertain or amuse. Now, I think that this folktale was told to reflect the beliefs or values of the Ashanti people because they say that Anansi is their folk hero because he saved their stories from the sky god. That tells me that they have the belief that their stories, their folk tales, are really important to them. So I think that's the purpose of this, or that's the reason of this folk tale. So down here it says, I chose this reason because the Ashanti people call Anansi their folk hero. Because he saved their stories which tells me they are important. Tells me they believe, because I want to use the same language. They reflect beliefs. They believe the stories have value. Now, your independent work today is to complete this document, What's the Reason, page 10 in your ELA packet, thinking about your independent reading folktales that you have at home. If you don't have independent reading folktales at home, you can go back to our special edition TV classroom lessons and you can listen to Kwabi tell his folktale. You can listen to Melanie Denise Cunningham tell her folktale, and you can listen to Anthony Bluehorse tell his folktale, and you can figure out what is the reason for those folktales. Now today we learned to recognize why folktales have been told from generation to generation and how they reflect the values or beliefs of a culture. As I said, your independent work today is to complete the What's the Reason document and continue tracking your reading log during your independent reading time. A reminder that if you go back and watch our special episodes and that is how you're listening to a folktale, that counts as your reading time. Because you'll remember a common element of folktales is that they are told orally. And we need to honor that that is a tradition, that is how folktales can be told. So that does count as your reading, so make sure you track that. Mr. Kevin, how can our third graders send us their reflections or the reason that they came up with for the folktales that they listened to?
Well, sure, you can send them to TV Classroom at tacoma.k12.wa.us, or you can mail them to TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin. Now, third graders, this is the time for our affirmation when we say positive things about ourselves before we go off to complete our independent work. Today, you are going to join our TV classroom to remind yourself that I can do things. Say it out loud. I can do things. Excellent job, third graders. Now, go off and do all the things that need to be done, and I will see you back here next time in our TV classroom. Bye.